Zoom in public session. This part of our meeting is to consider two government motions and proposals to opt in pursuant to Protocols 19 and 21 of the Lisbon Treaty to aspects of Regulation 2018-1726 of the European Parliament and of the Council and the European Union Agency for the operational management of large-scale IT systems in the area of freedom, security and justice, also known as EU LISA. I want to welcome the Minister for Justice and Equality, Deputy Charles Flanagan, and his officials here today. But before we begin, first of all, to say to the Minister and his colleagues, I've already cautioned members to please make sure your mobile phones are on silent. And I also have to make you all aware that members should, under the salient rulings of the Chair, not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the House or an official by name in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. With nothing else to add, I would now like to invite the Minister to make his opening statement.
Thanks, members. Good morning. I'm pleased to be here, and I want to thank the committee for taking this matter this morning, joined by officials on my left, Patrick McCabe, on my right, John Dunphy. And the purpose of the motions is to seek the approval of the Oireachtas for Ireland to opt in to Regulation 2018-1726, which relates to the European Union Agency for the operational management of large-scale IT systems in the area of freedom, security and justice, or EU LISA for short. Ireland already participates in the EU LISA agency on the basis of our opt-in to EU LISA's establishing regulation EU 1077 of 11, which is repealed by this regulation. It's therefore necessary for Ireland to opt in to the new regulation, which strengthens the mandate of EU LISA. As a European Union agency, EU LISA has effectively contributed to the establishment of a coordinated, effective and coherent IT environment for the management of large-scale freedom, security and justice IT systems. EU LISA has enabled the pooling of expertise, the harnessing of synergies, and allowed a more flexible framework than was possible when the systems were developed and managed by the Commission, with certain tasks entrusted to public sector bodies in 2 member states. The new regulation will benefit member states and agencies who are end users of the relevant large-scale IT systems by enhancing the role of EU LISA with regard to future developments in IT systems and providing support to member states when required. Ireland has representatives who attend the advisory groups in respect of the IT systems in which we participate, which are the SIS2 and Eurodac. Representatives from Garda Síochána also participate in the management board of EU LISA, which, among other tasks, appoints and oversees the work of the agency's executive director. The support of EU LISA and our other partner member states has been invaluable to Ireland in the development of our own solutions for these large-scale IT systems. The participation of EU LISA is of particular importance for the Garda Síochána's project to connect to the Schengen Information System, SIS2. Technical experts from EU LISA have been involved both on the ground in Dublin and through web attendance at workshops on topics such as data migration. EU LISA are working closely with Garda Síochána to build and test the systems necessary to ensure that Ireland is in a position to go live on SIS2 early next year. Ireland's participation in EU LISA has also been important for our connection to the update of Ireland's national Eurodac systems, as required by our participation in the Eurodac regulation. Indeed, the Oireachtas approved Ireland's participation in both SIS2 and Eurodac, and we are now bound by our obligations under those regulations. The support of EU LISA is vital in meeting these obligations. This regulation expanding EU LISA's mandate will ensure that the agency is adapted to meet current challenges at EU level in the area of migration and security and provide a proper legal basis for EU LISA's operational management of the planned new IT systems. Before going into some detail about the new EU LISA regulation, I merely wish to emphasise, Caoimhghín, that participation in the EU LISA agency does not mean that Ireland will be opting into any additional regulations in respect of any EU large-scale IT system. Continued participation in EU LISA would not oblige Ireland to participate in the new systems under its expanded mandate. Ireland's participation in such systems is a matter for the individual legal bases governing such IT systems. In particular, I want to acknowledge concerns of deputies which were raised last night in the Dáil in relation to the proposed interoperability of EU large-scale IT systems. It is true that EU LISA will have a mandate to develop any technical features of interoperability which may arise as a result of proposals in this area. However, I want to be very clear that it is not the case that Ireland will participate in measures relating to the interoperability of large-scale EU IT systems in the Justice Home Affairs area as a result of our opt-in to this EU LISA regulation. Ireland has the option under Article 4 of Protocol 21 to participate in the forthcoming interoperability regulations following their adoption. These proposals have not yet been agreed at Union level. So the decision to exercise our opt-in would require the consent of the Oireachtas under the Justice and Home Affairs Protocol. There would be a debate on the merits of interoperability regulation at that point. So I would ask that deputies not by any manner or means conflate interoperability with this EU LISA regulation, which Ireland will participate in only insofar as it relates to the systems in which we already participate. It would not be appropriate to have a debate on the interoperability proposals, which have not yet been agreed at this time, because no decision has been made as to Ireland's participation in it. Ireland does not yet participate in all of the systems that it's proposed to make interoperable. For example, the ECRIS TCN system. Indeed, for this reason, I've been advised by the Office of the Attorney-General, and I decided not to propose to exercise Ireland's opt-in under Article 3 of Protocol 21 when the interoperability proposals were published. These proposals themselves are somewhat complex, would require a dedicated discussion as to their merits, but that's not the topic that's before us this morning. The number of EU large-scale IT systems has grown, and it is therefore important to place EU LISA's responsibility for their operational management on a statutory footing. In this regard, this regulation achieves this goal in respect of the entry-exit system and the EU travel information and authorisation system. Additionally, EU LISA will now be enabled to provide more support and advice to Member States. The regulation places additional responsibility on EU LISA for improving the quality of the data, establishing common data quality indicators and developing an anonymised central repository for reporting and statistics. The regulation extends EU LISA's mandate concerning research, in particular giving EU LISA the task of implementing the parts of the framework programme for research and innovation which relate to IT systems in the area of freedom, security and justice. It's proposed that more pilot projects may be entrusted to EU LISA. The new mandate of EU LISA offers the possibility of support to the Commission and to Member States in periods of exceptional need. I believe, therefore, that it's essential that Ireland is an active partner in Europe's fight against terrorism and the effort to ensure effective management of our borders. EU LISA is an essential agency that has demonstrated significant added value and whose expanded mandate effectively addresses gaps in the current systems. We look forward to continuing to play an active role in the agency, bearing in mind that our limited participation, which focuses on the field of police cooperation. I hope, therefore, that the committee will support the motion to exercise Ireland's opt-in to the regulation and continue what has been a beneficial relationship within EU LISA. Thanks, Caoimhghín.
Thank you, Minister. So now I'd like to invite members' contributions. Any questions? I have one indication, Deputy Clare Daly. Clare, I'd ask you to start,
Yeah,
please?
okay, right. Well, firstly, obviously, I fully appreciate that the motions allow us to opt into only certain aspects of the regulation, which has been passed anyway, so there's nothing we can do about it at this stage. And because obviously we're not in Schengen, most of it doesn't apply to us anyway, so I do accept that, including the most controversial aspects, that we discussed last night. But that doesn't mean that we haven't got an obligation to be critical of those or make points about them, and I do want to put them on the record, because the interoperability proposals that this committee yellow-carded last October are at the back of this. I mean, we sent a reasoned opinion to the Commission on their proposals for the interoperable border and security systems. This is basically nearly like an EU Stasi nearly at this stage, but Big Brother is most definitely watching if you weren't born inside the EU. And obviously the points, I'm not going to repeat them, but the European Data Protection Commissioner has huge problems with it. And what we're doing today is extending the competencies of an existing body, get that, and extending it in such a way to so that it can implement the controversial interoperability proposals that we weren't happy about in October. So the concerns, I suppose, about linking migration and terrorism, which is at the heart of this, remain. And we do need to have a serious discussion around this. Why is this happening, and how should we respond to it? In the opinion on the interoperability proposals last autumn, the data protection, the European Data Protection Supervisor signalled his concerns about these implications and actually called for a wider debate. And that's why we kicked and asked for it to be discussed in the House, because there hasn't been any debate at all in this, in the EU or in Ireland on it. And it is, creating a big mega interoperable database is a serious problem that I don't think the citizens of Europe have been consulted on. So we need to have these conversations. So I make no apologies that we have demanded a discussion on it last night, and that because nothing good can come of this linking of migration and terrorism. But I suppose my questions are really, could the Minister be clear on this? Are we here effectively only opting into the police cooperation aspects of SIS2? Is that it? If we agree to these motions, are we signing up to any of the other aspects, VIS, the border aspects of SIS2, EES and ETIAS, or do we remain entirely outside of those? I suppose they're my two questions.
First. We'll get that answered first. Minister, please.
Yeah. It does involve engagement in police cooperation, and there may well be other areas as well where we will engage in the cooperation. But I want to acknowledge the point you make about the data protection issues, it's important that data protection be upheld in respect of any further development of these systems. Members will be aware, of course, that SIS2 is supervised by the European Data Protection Supervisor, and that supervision is allocated to the data protection authorities in each member state. So any concerns that people might have about any perceived transgressions in respect of data protection can be allayed on the basis that when Ireland connects to SIS2, the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner will be obliged to investigate any complaints that might be received. I would add to that the fact that we have already undergone the Schengen evaluation in the area of data protection. So any concerns that deputies might have can be addressed by assurances on the part of the Office of the Data Protection Commission here. Ireland will not be participating in ETIAS or VIS, EES and the border aspects of SIS2. The legal solution that we have agreed explicitly provides that we can participate in the regulation without having to opt in to the underlying Schengen acquis. So Ireland is not a party to either the visa aspects or the border aspects of the Schengen framework. And that position will not in any way be affected or impacted upon by this regulation.
Just very, I mean, the Minister seems clear on the second question that we are remaining entirely outside of VIS, the border aspects of SIS2, EES and ETIAS. Okay,
Yes.
but the first question wasn't so clear in a sense. I mean, your question seemed to be that we are opting into more than the police cooperation aspects of SIS2. You mentioned other areas. What might they be?
Eurodac.
Only.
And police cooperation.
Only Eurodac, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, Deputy Daly? All right.
I'm finished, yeah.
Yeah, okay, wouldn't be applicable. Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. Deputy Donegal Leary was next to indicate, followed by Deputy O'Callaghan. Deputy Chambers now, as I see hands indicating.
Thanks. And thanks to the Minister for coming in. I think it's worth having this discussion. It was worth having the discussion yesterday. And I suppose the Minister has tried to state that it wouldn't be appropriate to have a discussion on interoperability here today. Obviously, it's not the primary topic before us here, but I do think the things are linked. It seems to me, and the Minister may disagree, but it seems to me that part of what this proposal is doing is prepping EU LISA for the forthcoming interoperability proposal. So, I don't think it's inappropriate to ask if the Minister is willing to answer. As things stand in relation to the interoperability proposals, does the Irish Government favour them?
Pardon?
As things stand in their current form, does the Irish Government favour the interoperability proposals?
No, we'll deal with that when we come to it. The motions this morning are quite specific. We're not going beyond those. There is no proposal, nor indeed should there be any inference of Ireland participating further in any interoperability arrangement. Should the issue arise in the future, it will of course be subject to debate, and that debate will involve an approval by the majority membership of the Oireachtas. But I want to make it clear that doesn't arise at this time, nor should that issue be in any way conflated or confused with the motions before us, which are quite clear in import. So there isn't any a proposal for further engagement in the interoperability framework.
Minister, I suppose, look, I'm not sure I'm going to get any more out of you in relation to that, but I'm not sure I agree either. If EU LISA is going to be one of the key vehicles for the interoperability proposals when they pass into European law, then I think obviously it is of relevance what position, whether Ireland decides to opt in or not. Now, obviously, those proposals could change, but I'd ask maybe a second time and maybe in a different form. Has the Irish Government communicated its view to the European institutions, to the Council or to the Commission in perhaps the last year on their view on the interoperability proposals?
No, again, I wish to make it clear that we're not involved in the decision-making process regarding the exercise of an opt-in to the interoperability police proposal. Ireland hasn't exercised our opt-in under Protocol 21, nor indeed is there a proposal in that regard. Were that to occur, it would be subject to our obligations, which would involve a debate here in the National Parliament.
Very well. Look, I suppose just finally, I suppose maybe if the Minister can outline, obviously there is an existing regulation that Ireland has opted into, and maybe if the Minister can outline briefly what the significant differences between this regulation we're discussing here today and that previous regulation.
Minister.
Well, we were obliged to give consideration to the new recast framework, which differs from the previous arrangement, and obviously in terms of ensuring that we assist in police cooperation, it's necessary now to engage at this enhanced level.
Deputy, you're okay. Thank you, Deputy O'Leary. Deputy Jim O'Callaghan.
Yeah,
please.
thanks, Chairman, and thanks, Minister and officials, for coming in. I don't have a question for you, but I just wanted to state, Chairman, that I support the motions seeking to enable Ireland to opt in to continue our participation in Eurodac and SIS2. I'm conscious of the fact that the Dáil previously approved our participation in these systems. So in effect, what we're doing is we're supporting these motions in order to continue our participation in them. I note what Deputy Daly says. I think it's correct to state that we shouldn't link migration with terrorism. But we do have an issue in the European Union in respect of crime and terrorism, and it has to be dealt with. And one of the ways to deal with it is through increased police cooperation. And I think these motions will assist in that cooperation continuing. When you look at what's happening in the United Kingdom at present and the chaos they've got themselves into over Brexit, one of the real concerns they have, and which has come home to roost with them, is that if they depart from the European Union without a deal, there's going to be issues in terms of the safety of that country, and that's the main reason why the Cabinet Secretary has given advice to the Cabinet there that they should not go out with no deal. So I'm conscious that the whole area of interoperability will have to be dealt with and will be brought back before the Dáil, and perhaps this committee and the government will have to make a decision on it. But in respect to the motions here today, we'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Deputy O'Callaghan. Deputy Jack Chambers, please.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask Minister, you mentioned the development of IT systems and the sharing of information and the Schengen information system in the motion. How does that, what's the interface of that with PULS in an Irish context? Is it a new system? Is information extracted from PULS, or what's the shared access approach just on a practical level?
Yeah, one of the objectives in developing the system is to ensure that there is an element of integration, and that's where the integration of the PULS system and, for example, GNIB, that in the event of a search taking place here within this jurisdiction, that the same search will also be carried out and take effect on the Schengen information system. So it's a dovetailing of the information here at national level with an integrated system across the European Union.
Okay, Deputy. Senator Black, please.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for coming in today. I suppose I just wanted to highlight, we've spent a lot of last year discussing the data protection and privacy, and I was just wondering, Minister, could you put it on record that you feel the proposal today is fully consistent with the general data protection regulation? And then I just have one other concern. I suppose I would share your concern about the interoperability. Domestically, we have some formal bodies that can act on abuses of power. But I'm concerned sensitive data, especially on migrants and refugees, will be shared and around the EU, and that these people will have little chance to challenge that if their data is misused. And I just think we need assurances on that. And will it be up to Irish bodies like the Data Protection Commissioner to hear complaints and police system? Thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
Senator. Thank you. Minister, please.
Yeah, well, I would be satisfied as far as the European data protection regime is concerned, with particular reference to the role of the supervisor. But I would perhaps prefer to hear from our Data Protection Commissioner on this issue. And there is, as I mentioned earlier, a significant role for our Data Protection Commissioner in the context of the European Data Protection Supervisor. And I believe it's important that in all circumstances that fundamental rights would be observed and that we would not engage in any activity that might in any way encroach upon what might be regarded as fundamental rights. That's why the involvement at Justice and Home Affairs level of the European Fundamental Rights Agency is important.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Senator. We're okay. I think we've probably exhausted any questions we have to put to you, Minister. So on behalf of the committee, I want to thank you and your officials for joining us here today. In accordance with Standing Order 90 and Standing Order 89.2, messages will be sent to the Clerk of the Dáil and the Cathaoirleach of the Seanad that the Joint Committee on Justice and Equality has completed its consideration of motions referred to it on the 9th of April 2019, read the proposed approval by Dáil Éireann and Seanad Éireann of the exercise of options under Protocols 19 and 21 annexed to the Treaty on European Union and Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. That completes our address this morning in joint session. Minister, as we all know, we have to break now for 15 minutes before we can commence our morning's work in Select Committee for consideration of your revised estimates. Caoimhghín.